The smell of disinfectant lingered in the sterile hospital room. Machines beeped steadily, and the cries of a newborn filled the air. Emily Parker, 30 years old, lay exhausted on the bed, her body aching from an emergency C-section that had nearly cost her life. She had dreamed of this moment for years. The first time she would hold her baby boy after 7 long years of failed treatments, tears, and broken hopes. When the nurse gently placed the tiny bundle in her arms, she thought nothing could shatter this happiness. But the door opened, and in walked Michael Parker, her husband, the billionaire tech mogul everyone admired, the man who once whispered promises of forever. He didn't rush to hold their child. He didn't smile at his wife. Instead, he set down a thick envelope on the metal tray beside her bed. His voice was cold, almost rehearsed. "Emily," he said without looking at her face, "I want a divorce. I found someone else." The room fell silent. Emily's arms trembled as she clutched her baby closer, her stitches burning with pain. She thought she had misheard him. Divorce? Now? Just hours after risking her life to give him a child? Michael continued, his tone sharp as glass. "I'll take care of the settlement. You'll be comfortable. But this marriage is over. Madison is the woman I truly love." Madison. The name hit Emily like a dagger. She had suspected another woman during her pregnancy, but she had pushed away those thoughts, clinging to hope. And now, on the very day she should have been happiest, her entire world was collapsing. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. Even Helen, Michael's own mother, who had been quietly standing near the window, gasped in disbelief. Emily's lips quivered. She wanted to scream, to beg, to demand why. But her voice cracked into a whisper instead. "I almost died giving birth to your child, and this is what you bring me." Michael's eyes remained cold. "You'll thank me one day. This is for the best." And with that, the billionaire who had once vowed to cherish her walked out, leaving Emily bleeding, trembling, and alone, with nothing but her newborn son and a shattered heart. Emily Parker had always been the kind of woman people overlooked. She wasn't the type who commanded a room with flashing diamonds or expensive perfume. She was quiet, thoughtful, a woman who once believed love and family mattered more than status or power. Born and raised in a modest suburb outside Chicago, Emily came from hardworking parents who taught her that resilience was the only true wealth. Her father, a mechanic, spent nights covered in grease to keep food on the table. Her mother, a nurse, taught Emily that caring for others was life's greatest purpose. Emily grew up believing in simple happiness, the laughter of family dinners, Sunday strolls, and the dream of one day becoming a mother herself. In college, Emily studied architecture. She had a natural gift for design, a way of seeing beauty where others saw only concrete and steel. Professors praised her creativity, friends admired her determination. She had plans, big plans, to design homes for families who could never afford the glossy towers of downtown Chicago. But life took a different turn. When she met Michael Parker, he seemed like the answer to every prayer. He was charismatic, sharp, already climbing the ladder in the tech world. He had that spark, the kind that made people lean in when he spoke. Emily fell fast, believing she had found not only love but a partner who valued her dreams. Within a year, they were married. Within 2, Michael had become one of the youngest billionaires in the city, his tech empire spreading like wildfire. At first, Emily thought she was living a fairy tale. Michael whisked her to charity galas where crystal chandeliers glittered above champagne towers. She smiled for cameras, wore gowns she never thought she'd touch, and held his arm proudly. But behind the glitter, there was a price. Her own dreams slowly shrank. Architecture projects were pushed aside. "You don't need to work," Michael told her. "You're my wife now. Focus on us, on building a family." Emily agreed, telling herself it was temporary, that she could return to her passion later. But later never came. For years, Emily battled infertility in silence. She endured needles, surgeries, countless failed treatments, all while Michael's empire soared. He promised he'd be there, yet he always found an excuse to miss the appointments, the nights she cried on the bathroom floor. Still, Emily clung to hope. She told herself love meant patience, and one day they'd hold their baby together. That day finally arrived, though not as she had imagined. After an emergency C-section that nearly took her life, Emily cradled her newborn son, her miracle, her proof that all the pain had been worth it. She thought Michael would hold her hand, whisper that it had all been for this. Instead, he walked in with divorce papers. Now, lying in that hospital bed, her stitches burning, Emily realized the truth. Her entire marriage had been a performance for him, a carefully staged life. To the world, she was Mrs. Michael Parker, the billionaire's perfect wife. But to him, she had become disposable, an obstacle to the new life he wanted with Madison. And yet, even in her devastation, Emily held something stronger than Michael's billions: her son. As she gazed down at the tiny face nestled against her chest, she whispered a silent vow. "I may have lost my husband, my dreams, even my dignity, but I will not lose you. For you, I will rise again." What Emily didn't know was that this vow would change everything, and the woman Michael thought was weak was about to become the strongest force he had ever faced. Chicago glittered like a jewel at night. Towering glass skyscrapers reflected the city lights, their mirrored surfaces hiding stories of triumph and betrayal. To the outside world, Michael Parker's empire was one of those towers, unshakable, impenetrable, drenched in wealth and influence. But inside, behind those tinted windows and glossy magazine covers, his marriage was collapsing like a house of cards. Emily Parker had once been dazzled by this world. The lavish penthouse on the 72nd floor, with its sweeping view of Lake Michigan. The imported marble floors that felt too cold under her bare feet. The endless closets filled with designer gowns, some still wrapped in tissue paper, gifts from Michael that he never noticed if she wore. For a while, she had convinced herself these luxuries were proof of love. But now, every sparkling chandelier, every silent hallway felt like a prison. The hospital was just the beginning. After Michael handed her the divorce papers, Emily returned to this penthouse with their newborn son, but it no longer felt like home. The kitchen, with its chrome appliances worth more than her parents' entire house, was untouched. The nursery Michael had promised to decorate remained unfinished, boxes stacked in the corner. And the master bedroom, the place that had once felt sacred, was now haunted by Madison's perfume. Emily had found traces, a golden hair clip on the nightstand, a wine glass with lipstick stains. Even Michael's mother, Helen, noticed the change. She had moved quietly into the guest room to help Emily recover from the surgery. In the evenings, she would rock the baby and whisper, "My poor girl, you deserve so much better." Emily never replied. She was too busy pretending to be strong, even as her stitches burned and her heart shattered. Outside these walls, Michael's life was painted in gold. He still appeared at charity galas, his tuxedo flawless, Madison on his arm. Paparazzi cameras flashed as they walked red carpets, headlines praising Chicago's most powerful couple. Emily watched from the sofa, the television screen, reflecting her pale, tear-streaked face. The world believed Michael had it all, while the woman who had nearly died giving him an heir was hidden away, forgotten, erased from the story. This contrast became Emily's prison. The city worshipped her husband, while she nursed her wounds in silence. Nights were the worst. From the penthouse windows, she could see the lights of Chicago blinking, endless lives moving forward. But inside, she was stuck, bleeding, aching, with a crying infant in her arms and no husband at her side. The setting was cruel in its irony. Here she was, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, artwork worth millions, jewelry locked in velvet drawers, a library stacked with first editions, and yet she felt poorer than she ever had. She longed for the small house of her childhood, the sound of her father's laughter in the garage, the smell of her mother's homemade soup. Those simple comforts meant more than all the glitter Michael's world could offer. But this setting, this glittering cage, would not destroy her. It would forge her. As Emily looked out across the city skyline, holding her baby close, a flicker of resolve sparked within her. If Michael thought she would vanish quietly, if Madison believed she could replace her, they were both mistaken. For now, Emily was trapped in the gilded tower Michael had built. But the same city that worshipped him would soon hear her voice. And when they did, the world would finally see who truly deserved the crown. Because this story wasn't about Michael Parker, the billionaire. It was about Emily Parker, the woman who had been left to die and who would rise from the ashes stronger than anyone imagined. Michael Parker had built an empire on brilliance and betrayal. By 35, he was worth over $12 billion, his tech company dominating headlines as the future of artificial intelligence. To investors and the press, Michael was a visionary, a man whose smile could move markets, whose handshake sealed billion-dollar deals. But to those who truly knew him, Michael was something else entirely, ruthless, cold, and loyal only to his ambition. Emily had once admired that ambition. She thought it was strength. She thought his late nights in the office, his endless calls, were sacrifices for their shared future. What she didn't know was that those nights were often spent with Madison Cole, the woman who would become both Michael's obsession and Emily's nightmare. Madison was 26, sharp and stunning, with a calculated charm that made men underestimate her intelligence. She had started as Michael's executive assistant, quick on her feet, always knowing the right words to soothe him after a boardroom battle. But soon, her role expanded far beyond scheduling meetings. She became his confidant, his escape, his secret indulgence. Where Emily offered loyalty, Madison offered excitement. Where Emily believed in patience, Madison whispered impatience. She told Michael he deserved more. A wife who matched his fire, who could dazzle at galas, who wouldn't be held back by motherhood. And Michael listened. He always listened, especially when her hands traced his jaw and her lips promised a life of endless passion. Behind Emily's back, Michael showered Madison with everything he once gave his wife. A penthouse of her own downtown, jewelry that sparkled under gala lights, vacations disguised as business trips. To the world, Michael was still the devoted husband, but Madison was the one slipping into his car at midnight, the one captured in blurred paparazzi photos that tabloids dismissed as coincidences. When Emily confronted him once, months before the baby was born, Michael dismissed her fears with a laugh. "You're imagining things. You're just tired, Emily. Focus on the pregnancy." And Emily, desperate to believe him, forced herself into silence. But Madison had no intention of remaining a shadow. She wanted more than stolen nights. She wanted Michael's name, his empire, his crown. To her, Emily was not a woman, but an obstacle. The cruelest moment came not at a gala, not in a courtroom, but in Emily's own home. Days after the baby's birth, Madison arrived unannounced. She walked into the penthouse with the confidence of someone who believed she belonged. In her hand, she carried a bouquet of white roses, a mockery of celebration. "Don't look at me like that," Madison said, her voice smooth, her smile razor-sharp. "I didn't steal anything. Michael was mine before he was yours. I'm just taking back what should have never been yours to begin with." Emily stood frozen, her stitches aching, her baby crying in the bassinet. She wanted to scream, to throw Madison out, but her body was too weak. She could only watch as Madison placed the roses on the marble counter like a victory flag. Later that night, Michael returned, unapologetic. He looked Emily in the eye and said the words that burned her soul. "Madison understands me in a way you never did." That was the villainy of Michael Parker. Not just his betrayal, but his conviction that Emily should accept it. To him, love was disposable. Loyalty was replaceable. And Emily, the woman who had given him everything, even her body, nearly her life, was nothing more than a chapter he was ready to erase. But Michael had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated Emily. And villains who underestimate their victims never see the ending coming. The Parker name was always tied to spectacle. Galas, charity auctions, red carpets. Michael thrived under the glow of cameras. For years, Emily had been by his side at these events, smiling through the flashbulbs, even when her heart ached. But this night would be different. This was the night the humiliation became public. It was the annual Tech Innovators Gala, the most prestigious event of the year, hosted at the Chicago Cultural Center. Crystal chandeliers bathed the marble hall in golden light, and the air buzzed with power. CEOs, senators, Hollywood actors, everyone who mattered was there. For the first time since giving birth, Emily found herself in the spotlight again. She hadn't planned to attend. Her body still ached from surgery, and her soul was too raw. But Helen, her mother-in-law, convinced her. "You need to be seen, Emily. You're still his wife, still the mother of his son. Don't let them erase you." So Emily put on a simple black gown, elegant but understated. She walked into the gala with her head held high, determined to remind the world she still existed. For a brief moment, she felt strong. Until she saw them. Michael entered minutes later, Madison on his arm. The crowd turned, applauding, whispering, snapping photos. Madison glittered in a crimson gown designed to steal attention, her diamond necklace catching the light. She clung to Michael as though she had already won, as though Emily had never mattered. The whispers began instantly. "Is that Madison Cole? She's gorgeous." Poor Emily. Can you imagine? Emily's stomach twisted. She tried to steady her breath, but the humiliation burned through her veins. She felt the weight of every gaze, every pitying smile. She had survived betrayal in private, but now the world was invited to watch her downfall. Michael spotted her across the hall. For a moment their eyes met. He didn't look ashamed. He looked triumphant. As though parading Madison before Emily was his final declaration, "You are nothing compared to her." The cruelty didn't stop there. When the Master of Ceremonies welcomed Michael to the stage to receive an award for Visionary of the Year, Madison followed him up, standing proudly at his side. The cameras clicked furiously. To the audience it looked as though she was his wife, his queen. Emily sat frozen at a back table, her glass of water trembling in her hand. Then came the final blow. As Michael delivered his acceptance speech, he spoke of the people who inspire him, the people who give him strength. Emily braced herself, waiting to hear her name. But instead, Michael turned to Madison. "And to Madison," he said, smiling as the crowd applauded, "thank you for believing in me when no one else did." The words struck Emily like bullets. Her vision blurred, her chest tightened, the room spun, and for a moment she thought she might faint. She excused herself quietly, slipping out of the grand hall before anyone could see her tears. Outside, the cold Chicago night wrapped around her like a cruel reminder of reality. She pressed her hand against her abdomen, feeling the ache of her healing scar, and whispered to herself, "Never again. I will never let them break me like this again." That night of humiliation would become the turning point. Michael thought he had destroyed her in public. What he didn't know was that Emily had just found the fire she needed to rise. The drive back from the gala felt endless. Chicago's glittering skyline blurred past the car window, but Emily saw nothing. Her reflection in the glass looked hollow, ghostly, like a woman who had lost not only her husband, but her identity. When she reached the penthouse, Helen helped her out of the car. Emily held her baby tighter than ever, as though the tiny heartbeat against her chest was the only thing anchoring her to the world. She whispered, almost to herself, "As long as I have you, I can survive this." But when the door closed behind her and the silence of the penthouse wrapped around her, the dam broke. She set her son gently in his crib, kissed his forehead, and then collapsed onto the floor beside the bed. Her body shook with sobs so violent she thought her stitches might tear open again. She cried for the humiliation at the gala, for the betrayal, for the years she had given up her dreams only to be discarded like trash. Her voice cracked into the emptiness. Why wasn't I enough? There was no answer, only the sound of her baby's soft breathing, the faint hum of the city far below, and her own heart breaking piece by piece. Helen entered quietly, her face etched with sorrow. She sat beside Emily on the floor, wrapping an arm around her trembling shoulders. "My dear," Helen whispered, "my son may have given up on you, but I never will. You are not alone." But Emily barely heard her. The images from the gala replayed in her mind on a cruel loop. Michael's triumphant smile, Madison's crimson gown, the crowd's applause. The words echoed, "And to Madison, thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Each word was a dagger, each memory another wound. For days after, Emily drifted like a ghost through the penthouse. She ate little, slept less. She stared at her baby, afraid she wasn't strong enough to give him the life he deserved. The once bright woman who had dreamed of building homes for others now struggled to keep the walls of her own heart from collapsing. One night, overwhelmed by despair, she stood at the window, gazing down 72 stories at the city lights below. The thought crossed her mind, what if she stepped forward, ended the pain, let the world swallow her whole? But then, a cry pierced the silence. Her son's cry. Emily turned, tears blurring her vision, and saw him reaching out from the crib, tiny hands grasping at the air as if searching for her. In that fragile moment she realized the truth. She could not leave him. She was all he had, and he was all she had. She rushed to him, scooping him into her arms, pressing his warm cheek against her tear-stained face. She whispered through sobs, "I'll never leave you. No matter what he's done to us, I will never abandon you. The breakdown had nearly consumed her. The humiliation, the betrayal, the weight of loneliness, it had pushed her to the edge. But her son's cry pulled her back. Emily's tears that night were not just of pain. They were the beginning of transformation. In her lowest moment, she discovered the reason to rise again. And nothing Michael or Madison could do would take that from her. The morning after her darkest night, Emily woke with swollen eyes and a pounding heart. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, mocking her pain with its brightness. She moved slowly, cradling her son as if he were her only anchor. But beneath her exhaustion, something inside her had shifted. She had survived. Barely, but she had. And survival meant there was still a chance to fight. That afternoon, Helen handed her a thick envelope. "This arrived yesterday," she said softly. "I didn't want to give it to you while you were so fragile." Emily frowned, opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, on legal stationery. At first, she thought it was another cruel document from Michael, perhaps more divorce papers, another attempt to crush her spirit. But as her eyes scanned the words, her breath caught. The letter wasn't from Michael. It was from her late father's attorney. Her father, who had passed away 3 years earlier, had left something behind. A trust. A collection of investments he had quietly built over decades, never telling anyone except his lawyer. The assets had been dormant, waiting for Emily's 30th birthday, which had passed just weeks before she gave birth. Her father had planned it this way. He must have known she would need protection one day. The letter detailed that Emily was now the majority shareholder of a mid-sized architecture and construction firm, one her father had once helped save from bankruptcy with his modest earnings. It wasn't a billion-dollar empire like Michael's, but it was something real. Something hers. Emily's hands shook as she read the final line. "Your father wanted you to have the foundation to build your own future. He believed you would rise higher than you ever dreamed." For the first time in weeks, Emily laughed through her tears. Her father had believed in her when Michael never did, and he had left her the tools to reclaim her life. But the twist didn't end there. When Helen saw the papers, her eyes widened. "Emily," she whispered, "do you realize what this means? Michael's company has been trying to secure contracts with that very firm for years, and now you own it." The realization struck like lightning. Michael, the billionaire who thought she was powerless, was now indirectly tied to her through business. The man who wanted her erased might soon have to face her across a boardroom table. Emily clutched her baby closer, her heart pounding with something she hadn't felt in months: hope. For so long she had seen herself as a victim, broken and discarded. But now she held leverage, a secret weapon Michael didn't know existed. That night, as she rocked her son to sleep, Emily opened her old laptop. She dug through forgotten folders until she found them, her unfinished designs, her dreams of building homes that mattered. She whispered, "We'll call it Phoenix Designs, because like the phoenix we rise from ashes." The twist of fate had given her more than just money. It had given her purpose, a reason to fight not just for survival, but for victory. Michael believed she was finished. Madison believed she had won. But Emily had a secret no one expected, and with it, she was about to rewrite the story. Emily stared at the glowing screen of her old laptop. The cursor blinked against the blank page, waiting. For years, she had buried her talent under Michael's shadow, told herself her role was to support him, to be the wife who smiled in photographs and the woman who waited at home. But now, staring at the inheritance papers from her father, she realized she had something Michael couldn't take away: her own mind. It began with one sketch, a line, a curve, a vision of a home that could shelter not just bodies, but broken hearts. She worked at night, after putting her baby to sleep, her fingers moving with determination she hadn't felt in years. The pain of betrayal still lived in her chest, but each design she drew felt like stitching a wound shut. She named her dream Phoenix Designs, a rebirth, rising from ashes. Days turned into weeks. With Helen's support, Emily contacted her father's lawyer and arranged meetings with the architecture firm she now partly owned. The executives were surprised. They expected a timid widow's daughter, fragile and unprepared. Instead, they found a woman with quiet fire in her eyes, holding a baby on her hip and design portfolios under her arm. Some scoffed. "She's just Michael Parker's cast-off wife," one board member whispered. But Emily didn't flinch. She stood taller, her voice steady. "I'm not here because of my husband. I'm here because of my father, and because of my vision. If you doubt me, look at my work." When she laid her sketches on the table, silence followed. Clean lines, smart use of space, designs that balanced strength with warmth. It wasn't the flashy extravagance Michael's world adored. It was human. It was real. And for the first time, the men in suits leaned forward, curious. Outside the boardroom, Emily transformed too. She stopped hiding in black gowns of modesty. She chose clothes that made her feel powerful. Structured blazers, bold colors, heels that clicked against marble floors like a declaration of war. She cut her hair shorter, framing her face with sharp confidence. In the mirror, she saw not the abandoned wife, but the woman who had survived fire and was learning to command it. Her return to society began quietly. Small meetings, community projects, a design for a women's shelter in the South Side. She visited the site herself, wearing a hard hat, her baby strapped against her chest. Local women shook her hand, thanking her for giving them dignity through design. That night, Emily wept, not from sorrow, but from pride. For once, her work mattered again. Word spread. Michael Parker's wife is making her own name. Headlines shifted. The woman they had pitied at the gala was now being called the Phoenix of Chicago. And Michael? He hadn't seen it coming. In his glass tower, Michael skimmed the article and laughed bitterly. "She thinks she can play in my world? She'll learn the hard way." But behind his arrogance, unease stirred. Because for the first time, Emily wasn't crying in silence. She was rising. The transformation wasn't just external. Inside, Emily's heart hardened and healed at once. She no longer whispered, "Why wasn't I enough?" Now she told herself, "I was always enough. He just wasn't worthy." The woman Michael left bleeding in a hospital bed no longer existed. In her place stood a phoenix, reborn, unshakable, and ready to face him in the one arena he never thought she'd dare to enter. His world of power. The whispers began before she even stepped into the ballroom. The tech leaders' annual conference wasn't just a business event. It was the gathering of power, money, and influence in Chicago. Every CEO, every investor, every politician who mattered was there. And for years, Michael Parker had been the star of the show. He was used to standing at the center of flashing cameras, Madison at his side, as the world applauded his brilliance. But this year would be different. Emily Parker hadn't planned on making her move so soon. She wanted more time to prepare, more projects to complete, more strength to build. But when her father's firm, now under her control, was invited to present their newest housing initiative at the same conference, she knew fate had chosen the moment. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne. Michael arrived first, Madison clinging to his arm in a gown dripping with jewels. Reporters swarmed them. "Michael, over here." "Mr. Parker, is it true your company is expanding into urban housing?" Michael grinned, prepared with smooth answers. Then the crowd shifted. Heads turned. Cameras clicked. Emily entered. She wore a sleek white gown, elegant and commanding, her hair swept back, her eyes steady. On her arm wasn't a date, but her portfolio, thick with designs. Her presence stole the air from the room. People whispered, "Isn't that Michael's ex? She looks incredible." "What's she doing here?" Michael froze when he saw her. His smile faltered just for a second. Madison's grip tightened, her lips curling in irritation. The conference began with presentations. One after another, executives boasted of profits, charts, projections. Then the moderator called, "Next, we'll hear from Phoenix Designs." Emily rose. The room fell silent. Few had heard of Phoenix Designs, but all eyes locked on her. She walked to the stage, heels echoing across the marble floor. Her voice was steady, calm yet filled with quiet fire. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I'm not here to show profits. I'm here to show purpose." She unveiled her designs, affordable, sustainable housing for struggling families, built not for investors but for real people. Images of warm, modern homes filled the screen behind her. Gasps echoed through the hall. "These homes," Emily continued, "aren't just walls and roofs. They are places where children will laugh, where mothers will heal, where futures will begin. I know this, because I was almost one of those mothers left with nothing. But from ashes, we rise." The room erupted in applause. Michael's face turned stone. He realized too late that Emily's firm had secured contracts his company had been chasing for years. She had outmaneuvered him, not in private, but in front of the very world that once worshipped him. Madison whispered, "She's nothing, Michael. Don't let them forget who you are." But for once, he had no words. He could only watch as Emily, the woman he thought broken, received a standing ovation. As Emily stepped down from the stage, investors rushed to her side. "Ms. Parker, we'd love to discuss partnerships. Your vision is extraordinary. We want to be part of this." Emily smiled politely, thanking them, but her eyes sought only one face, Michael's. Their gazes met across the room. For the first time, he looked small, cornered. And Emily's look said it all. "The game has changed. You don't own me anymore." That night marked the beginning of Emily's public revenge. She didn't just reclaim her voice. She took her place in Michael's world and proved she could outshine him in it. The conference ended, but the electricity in the air lingered. Emily had stolen the spotlight, leaving Michael humiliated before the very people who once idolized him. Yet the night was not over. Fate had prepared one more stage, the private after-party reserved for industry titans. Emily hadn't planned to attend, but investors begged her to join. "You belong there," Helen whispered, squeezing her daughter-in-law's hand. So Emily went, not to celebrate, but to finish what Michael had started years ago when he betrayed her. The venue was an exclusive rooftop lounge overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. Inside, champagne flowed, laughter echoed, and billionaires mingled under the stars. But when Emily stepped into the room, the atmosphere shifted. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. Even here, among the most powerful, her presence commanded attention. Michael was already there, standing near the balcony with Madison glued to his side. His jaw tightened the moment he saw Emily. Madison's nails dug into his arm, her smile sharp and mocking. Emily walked straight toward them. The crowd instinctively parted, giving space as if they sensed history unfolding. "Michael?" Emily said evenly, her voice carrying over the music. He forced a smile, trying to recover his composure. "Emily, quite the performance tonight, but don't confuse applause with power. These people will forget you tomorrow." Emily tilted her head, calm but cutting. "Funny, that's what you said to me once before. And yet here I am, stronger, louder, unforgettable." Madison laughed, tossing her hair. "Please, you're nothing without his name. Without Michael, you'd still be drawing houses on napkins." Emily turned to her, eyes steady. "Without Michael, I'd still have my dignity. Can you say the same?" The room stirred, whispers spread. Madison's smile faltered for the first time. Michael's face hardened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "This game you're playing, it won't last. You think you can challenge me? I built an empire. You're just a woman who lucked into a few contracts." Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a folder. She handed it to him. "These are copies of the contracts Phoenix Designs secured last month. The ones your company has been chasing for years. Tell me, Michael, does that look like luck?" He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the documents. For the first time, his mask cracked. The color drained from his face. He had underestimated her, and now the evidence was in his hands. The crowd watched silently, waiting. Madison leaned in, her voice sharp. "Michael, don't let her get away with this. You're still the king here." Emily's voice cut through like glass. "Kings fall, Madison, but queens rise." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. In that moment, Emily wasn't just confronting Michael, she was declaring victory before the world. Michael clenched the folder, his knuckles white. He wanted to lash out, but the room was no longer his to control. The whispers, the stares, the flashing lights, they all belonged to Emily now. She turned to leave, pausing just long enough to glance back. "Enjoy the view, Michael. It's the last time you'll ever look down on me." And with that, Emily walked away. Not as the abandoned wife, but as the woman who had faced her betrayer and left him standing in ruins. The cracks in Michael Parker's empire appeared slowly at first. Like tiny fractures in glass no one noticed until it was too late. The morning after the confrontation, headlines exploded. Emily Parker steals spotlight at tech gala. Phoenix Designs outshines billionaire ex-husband. Queen rises as king stumbles. Michael slammed the newspaper onto his mahogany desk. His executives sat in tense silence, avoiding his glare. For years they had followed him without question, intoxicated by his confidence. But now doubt flickered in their eyes. "Why am I reading about Phoenix Designs on the front page instead of us?" Michael barked. One executive cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, investors are asking why Phoenix secured contracts we've been chasing for months. They want answers." Michael's fist slammed the desk. "Phoenix Designs is nothing without me. Emily is nothing without me." But deep down, he knew it wasn't true. Meanwhile, Madison watched from the sidelines, her patience thinning. She had enjoyed the spotlight, the diamonds, the private jets. But now, whispers of Michael's decline spread through Chicago's elite. At parties, people no longer praised him. They pitied him. And Madison hated pity. One night, in their penthouse suite, she confronted him. "Michael, this isn't the man I signed up for. Where's the power? Where's the glory?" Michael poured himself another drink. His tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot. "It's a setback. Emily's playing games, but she'll fade. She always does." Madison's laugh was cold. "She's not fading, Michael. She's winning. And you," she gestured at his glass, his disheveled suit, "you're losing." He spun on her, anger flashing. "You think you can lecture me? You'd still be answering phones if it weren't for me." Madison's smile turned razor-sharp. "Maybe. But at least I'd still have options. Do you?" The words cut deeper than she realized, because at that very moment, Michael's phone buzzed with a message he had been dreading. "The board has called an emergency meeting." The next day, he walked into the boardroom, his confidence forced. But the faces around the table were cold. One by one, his allies spoke. Declining stock prices, failed deals, investor panic. And then, the final blow. Evidence of financial mismanagement leaked to the press. Someone had handed over documents that painted Michael not as a visionary, but as reckless. He scanned the room, betrayal in his eyes. Who leaked this? No one answered. But when he returned to his penthouse, Madison was gone. Her closet empty, her diamond necklace missing. On the marble counter a note, "I don't stay with losers, M." Michael sank into a chair, the silence deafening. The empire he had built, the woman he had chosen over his wife, both slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, Emily watched the headlines unfold from her modest office at Phoenix Designs. Michael Parker under fire. Billionaire faces boardroom revolt. She felt no joy in his suffering, only justice. For years he had believed he was untouchable, that money could shield him from consequences. But now, stripped of power and betrayed by the woman he abandoned everything for, Michael was finally tasting the bitter truth. The king had fallen, and the world was watching. While Michael's empire crumbled, Emily's world was quietly transforming. Phoenix Designs, once dismissed as the charity project of a scorned wife, was exploding with momentum. After her electrifying presentation at the Tech Leaders Conference, calls flooded in. Investors wanted meetings. Nonprofits wanted partnerships. City officials wanted her blueprints. And for the first time in years, Emily felt something she thought she had lost forever: purpose. Every morning began the same. She kissed her baby's forehead, dropped him into Helen's loving arms, and walked into her modest downtown office. It wasn't a skyscraper suite with glass walls and leather chairs. The paint was chipped, the desks second-hand, the carpet worn, but the room buzzed with energy. Architects, designers, and interns worked late into the night, inspired by her vision. They didn't see her as Michael Parker's ex-wife. They saw her as a leader. Emily led with empathy. She knew what it felt like to be broken, to be dismissed, to be told you weren't enough. So when she sat across from struggling families and listened to their stories, she didn't just nod politely. She understood. She translated their pain into walls and windows, their hopes into blueprints. Her homes weren't monuments of wealth like Michael's towers. They were sanctuaries. Soon, Phoenix Designs launched its first major project, a housing community called Haven. Rows of affordable, sustainable homes designed for single mothers, veterans, and families on the edge of poverty. The groundbreaking ceremony drew hundreds. Reporters swarmed Emily, microphones flashing. "Miss Parker," one asked, "how does it feel to step out of your ex-husband's shadow?" Emily smiled, holding her son close. "I'm not stepping out of anyone's shadow. I'm standing in my own light." The quote went viral. Overnight, Emily became a symbol, not just of resilience, but of reinvention. Magazines called her the Phoenix of Chicago. Talk shows invited her to speak. Women across the country wrote letters, thanking her for showing them that betrayal didn't have to be the end of their story. Meanwhile, Michael watched from afar. Each headline about Emily felt like another dagger. He had once believed she couldn't survive without him. Now, she was thriving in ways he never imagined, earning not only respect, but admiration he could no longer buy. And Emily wasn't just building houses. She was building power. The contracts she secured gave her leverage in the very industries Michael once dominated. City councils began favoring her proposals over his. Philanthropists shifted their donations from his foundation to hers. Slowly, quietly, she was rewriting the balance of influence in Chicago. At night, when the city lights sparkled outside her apartment window, Emily would rock her son to sleep and whisper, "We did it. We're doing it." Her heart still bore scars, but the weight of humiliation had been replaced by pride. She had been the woman left bleeding in a hospital bed, abandoned and humiliated. Now she was the woman standing on stages, designing futures, and holding the world's attention. Emily Parker was no longer just Michael Parker's ex-wife. She was Emily Parker, the phoenix, the builder, the mother, the woman who turned ashes into fire, and her rise was only just beginning. For a time, Madison Cole believed she had won. She strutted through Chicago's elite circles, draped in jewels Michael bought her, boasting of her new role as the future Mrs. Parker. People whispered about her boldness, some envied her, others despised her. But she didn't care. She had the billionaire, the penthouse, the spotlight. But the glitter began to fade the moment Michael's empire started to crack. The headlines that once glorified him turned vicious. Parker under investigation. Stock prices plummet. Investors flee billionaire's sinking ship. Invitations to galas slowed. Reporters stopped calling. Suddenly, Madison's crimson gowns and diamonds looked less like triumph and more like desperation. She tried to hold on. She posted curated photos online, flaunting dinners and vacations, desperate to maintain the illusion of power. But the comments told another story. "Where's Emily? You'll never replace her. Gold digger." At first, Madison laughed it off. But as the ridicule grew louder, the smile slipped from her lips. Her breaking point came one night at a gala she insisted they attend. Even as Michael warned her it was a mistake, they walked into the room expecting admiration. Instead, silence greeted them. Eyes turned cold, conversations hushed, and then, as Emily entered moments later, poised, radiant, respected, the crowd erupted in applause. It wasn't for Michael. It wasn't for Madison. It was for the woman they had tried to erase. Madison's cheeks burned as Emily glided past her without a glance. She clung tighter to Michael's arm, whispering through clenched teeth, "Do something. Don't let her take this from us." But Michael had no answer. After that night, Madison's phone stopped ringing. Her so-called friends disappeared. The men who once admired her now dismissed her as toxic, a liability. She wasn't the queen she thought she was. She was a mistress who had gambled on the wrong man. Desperate, Madison confronted Michael in their penthouse. "We need to fix this. You need to fix this." Michael, exhausted and half-drunk, muttered, "There's nothing to fix. Emily outplayed us. The board doesn't trust me anymore. The investors are gone. And you," he pointed at her with a bitter laugh, "you were never more than a distraction." The words hit her harder than she expected. For all her bravado, she had believed Michael loved her. She had believed she was different. But in the end, she was disposable too. When she stormed out that night, she didn't return. She tried calling old contacts, but doors slammed in her face. She applied for positions in companies she once thought beneath her, but no one wanted the scandalous mistress of a fallen billionaire. Within months, Madison's life shrank. No more penthouses, no more gowns, just a small apartment with peeling paint and overdue bills. She stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror, mascara streaking down her cheeks, whispering to herself, how did it all disappear so fast? The cruel truth was this: she had built her world on borrowed power, and when that power crumbled, so did she. Meanwhile, Emily's star only rose higher. Every headline praising Emily was another reminder to Madison that she had lost not only Michael, but the game entirely. The mistress who once mocked Emily with roses and arrogance was now forgotten. Just another cautionary tale of what happens when you gamble on betrayal. Michael Parker had always been the man who walked into a room and commanded it. But now, when he walked into boardrooms, he was met with silence and lowered eyes. The empire he once ruled had slipped from his grasp, and the woman he once discarded had risen to heights he could no longer touch. For weeks, he tried to convince himself it was temporary, that Emily's success was a fluke, that Madison's betrayal meant nothing, that he could rebuild. But the truth was impossible to ignore. His fortune was dwindling, his allies had abandoned him, and for the first time in his life, Michael Parker was powerless. And in that emptiness, one thought consumed him: Emily. He replayed their years together in his mind, the laughter they once shared, the way she looked at him when he still felt like a man worth admiring. He remembered her patience during his late nights, her quiet sacrifices, the gentle strength that Madison could never replicate. He began to see what he had thrown away. One evening, after too many glasses of whiskey, Michael found himself standing outside Emily's new office. Phoenix Design's logo gleamed proudly on the glass door. Through the window, he saw her, head bent over blueprints, her son playing quietly nearby. She looked radiant, alive, everything he wasn't. He walked in. Emily looked up, startled. Her eyes narrowed as she rose from her chair. "What are you doing here?" Michael forced a smile, trying to summon the charm that once bent crowds to his will. "Emily, I made mistakes. I see that now. I lost sight of what mattered. But I still love you. I want us back. For us. For our son." Her laughter was sharp, bitter. "You love me? You handed me divorce papers in a hospital bed, Michael. You humiliated me at galas. You replaced me like I was nothing. And now that you've lost everything, suddenly you remember love?" He stepped closer, desperation leaking through his polished mask. "I can change. We can start again. I'll give you everything." Emily cut him off. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "You had everything, Michael. My trust, my loyalty, my life. And you threw it away for Madison and your ego. There is no going back." For the first time, Michael's confidence cracked completely. He sank into the chair across from her, burying his face in his hands. "I don't know who I am without you," he whispered. Emily's gaze softened for a moment, not out of love, but pity. "Then maybe it's time you find out. Without me. Without us." Their son toddled over, tugging at Emily's skirt. He looked at Michael with innocent curiosity. "Mama, who is that man?" The word struck Michael like a blow to the chest. His own child didn't recognize him. Emily knelt, smoothing her son's hair. "That's someone who made choices, sweetheart. Choices that cost him his family." Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to beg, to undo every mistake. But he couldn't. Emily had drawn the line, and this time, nothing he said could move it. Michael Parker had once been the man who thought he could buy the world. Now he was just a broken man begging for forgiveness he would never receive. The day of the unveiling dawned crisp and golden, sunlight spilling across the Chicago skyline like a promise. For weeks, the city had buzzed about it. Emily Parker's grand project, the one that would redefine her career and cement Phoenix Designs as more than a company. It was the opening of Haven, the affordable housing community built for families who had been forgotten by the city's luxury-obsessed developers. Reporters, politicians, and community leaders gathered at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Cameramen jostled for position. Banners stretched across the site, proudly displaying the words, "Phoenix Designs, from ashes we rise." Emily arrived in a tailored navy suit, her son's small hand tucked in hers. She looked calm, but her heart pounded as she scanned the crowd. Not long ago, she had been the woman humiliated in a hospital bed, abandoned and erased. Now she stood at the center of attention, not because of Michael's name, but because of her own vision. The mayor stepped forward, smiling broadly. "Today we celebrate not just buildings, but hope. Thanks to Emily Parker and Phoenix Designs, hundreds of families will have a chance to rebuild their lives in dignity. This city is proud to call her one of its own." Applause thundered. Emily felt her son squeeze her hand. She glanced down and his wide eyes shone with pride. For him, this wasn't about headlines or politics. It was about having a mother who never gave up. When it was her turn to speak, Emily stepped up to the podium. Microphones flashed. She took a deep breath, steadying her voice. 3 years ago, she began, I was told my life was over, that I was replaceable, that I was nothing. And for a time I believed it. But standing here today, I know that pain was only the beginning. It broke me open so I could rebuild, not just myself, but something greater. She gestured to the row of houses behind her, their clean lines and warm colors gleaming in the sun. These homes are proof that we rise from ashes. They are for the single mothers, the veterans, the children who deserve more than survival. And I promise this is only the beginning. The crowd rose to its feet, applauding, some even wiping away tears. Cameras zoomed in, capturing Emily's face glowing with conviction. She was no longer the shadow of a billionaire. She was the light of her own making. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed her. "Emily, how does it feel to be Chicago's most inspiring success story? What would you say to women who feel broken the way you once did?" Emily smiled, holding her son close. "I'd tell them what I tell myself every day. You are never truly broken. You are simply being prepared to rise." The quote spread like wildfire, trending online within hours. Talk shows replayed her speech. Magazines declared her the face of resilience. And ordinary women across the country shared her words as a mantra. Meanwhile, Michael sat alone in his penthouse, watching her speech on television. His glass of whiskey trembled in his hand. He had once been the king of the city, but now the cameras no longer sought him. They sought her. Emily didn't need his empire anymore. She had built her own, and it was stronger because it came from pain, not privilege. That day, Emily Parker didn't just triumph in business. She triumphed in spirit. She had taken her humiliation, her heartbreak, and her betrayal, and turned them into a legacy the world would never forget. Michael Parker once believed his empire was untouchable. For years, his name opened doors, his face graced magazine covers, and his signature sealed billion-dollar deals. But now those doors slammed shut, the magazines mocked him, and no one wanted his signature except lawyers. The downfall began with the boardroom revolt. At first, Michael thought he could silence dissent. He swaggered into the meeting, armed with excuses, blaming market trends, scapegoating executives. But the board had evidence: mismanagement, questionable loans, hidden losses. Documents had surfaced, leaked to the press, exposing him as reckless, arrogant, and unfit to lead. Within an hour, the decision was unanimous. Michael Parker was removed as CEO of the company he had built from nothing. Security escorted him out of the glass tower he once ruled. Employees whispered as he passed, their eyes filled with pity and disgust. But losing his title was only the beginning. News outlets feasted on his collapse. Headlines screamed, "From visionary to villain, billionaire ousted amid scandal. Michael Parker's empire crumbles." Talk shows replayed footage of him storming out of the boardroom, humiliated. Investors pulled out, stock prices nosedived. Lawsuits followed like vultures circling a carcass, and then came the betrayal that broke him completely. Madison, the woman he sacrificed everything for, the woman he humiliated Emily to keep. She resurfaced in the press, but not by his side. She appeared on the arm of a rival tech mogul, smiling for cameras, dripping in jewels that weren't his. When asked about Michael, she laughed. "He was a chapter. I've moved on." Michael watched the clip alone in his penthouse, the television glow casting harsh shadows on his hollow face. His glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor. With Madison gone, Emily risen, and his empire destroyed, Michael spiraled. He drowned himself in whiskey, avoiding mirrors that reflected the ghost of the man he once was. His phone rang endlessly with calls from lawyers, creditors, and journalists, but he ignored them all. The final humiliation came in public. One night, desperate to prove he still mattered, Michael showed up uninvited at a charity gala. He wore an old tuxedo, wrinkled and stained, his tie loose, his hair disheveled. Cameras caught him stumbling through the crowd, trying to greet old allies who turned away in disgust. And then, across the room, he saw Emily. Radiant, confident, surrounded by leaders and investors who once worshipped him. Their eyes no longer followed him. They followed her. Michael tried to approach, but security blocked his path. "You're not welcome here, Mr. Parker." He froze, realizing the cruel truth. In a world that once revolved around him, he had become irrelevant. Staggering out into the night, he collapsed onto the steps, rain soaking through his suit. For the first time in his life, Michael Parker wept openly, not for his empire, not for Madison, but for the love and family he had thrown away. The king had fallen. Not with an explosion of power, but with the slow, agonizing unraveling of pride. And as the world moved forward without him, Michael Parker was left behind, a cautionary tale of greed, betrayal, and the price of underestimating the woman he thought he could break. The roar of applause from Haven's ribbon-cutting had long faded, but its echo lingered in Emily's heart. For the first time in years, she felt steady, strong. The humiliation, the betrayal, the nights of sobbing into her pillow, those memories still existed, but they no longer defined her. Healing didn't come all at once. It arrived in quiet moments, in the gentle rhythm of ordinary life. It came in the mornings when Emily woke to her son's giggles instead of tears. The boy, bright-eyed, mischievous, endlessly curious, was her anchor. He was proof that the worst pain of her life had given her the greatest gift. Each time his small hands wrapped around her fingers, Emily felt her scars soften. Healing came in her work too. Phoenix Designs wasn't just a company anymore. It was a mission. She poured her heart into each project, not chasing wealth or prestige, but meaning. And every time she handed over the keys of a new home to a family who thought they would never have one, a piece of her own brokenness stitched itself back together. But perhaps the greatest healing came from learning to forgive. Not Michael, not Madison, but herself. For years she had carried guilt like a weight. Guilt for not seeing the betrayal sooner. Guilt for believing Michael's lies. Guilt for thinking she wasn't enough. One evening, sitting by the lake as the Chicago skyline shimmered on the water, Emily whispered into the breeze, "You were always enough." It wasn't for anyone else, it was for her. A declaration, a release. Helen sat beside her, knitting quietly, a steady presence through every storm. "You've come so far, Emily," she said, her eyes glistening. "Your strength saved you, but your kindness will heal you." And she was right. Emily chose not to become bitter. She chose to heal not by hardening, but by opening herself to new possibilities. It was during a community event months later that David entered her life again. A lawyer who had once been her friend in college, David had quietly cheered her from the sidelines. He wasn't flashy like Michael, nor was he charming in the way that drew crowds. But he was steady, patient. He listened. When he looked at her, it wasn't as the ex-wife of a billionaire or the Phoenix of Chicago. He saw Emily, the woman who had endured, who had risen, who was still learning to trust herself. At first, Emily hesitated. The scars of betrayal were deep, and she feared opening her heart again. But David never rushed her. He showed up with small gestures, helping her son build a toy house, bringing her coffee after late nights at the office, walking with her along the lakefront when the weight of leadership pressed heavy on her shoulders. Slowly, Emily realized something profound. Love didn't have to be grand or glamorous to be real. Sometimes it was found in the quiet, consistent presence of someone who simply refused to leave. Her healing journey wasn't about forgetting Michael or erasing the past. It was about proving to herself that betrayal wasn't the end of her story. One night, as she tucked her son into bed, he looked up at her and asked, "Mama, are you happy now?" Emily smiled, her eyes misty. "Yes, sweetheart, happier than I ever thought I could be." In that moment, Emily knew the truth. She had healed, not because Michael had fallen, but because she had risen, stronger and softer all at once. Love was something Emily thought she had lost forever. After Michael's betrayal, she built walls around her heart, convinced it was safer to stay alone than to risk being broken again. But David was patient. He didn't try to tear down her walls, he simply stood outside them, steady and waiting, until she realized she didn't need the walls anymore. Their friendship deepened quietly. They met for coffee after long work days, strolled through Chicago's lakefront parks with her son skipping between them, and talked late into the night about dreams, fears, and second chances. David never pushed. He let Emily lead, knowing her scars required time. One evening, after a long day at the Haven project site, Emily returned home exhausted. She found David sitting on the floor with her son, surrounded by Lego bricks. They were building a tiny house, complete with windows and a crooked roof. "Look, Mama," her son beamed. "David helped me build our house." Emily's heart tightened. For so long, she had feared her son would grow up without a father figure, without a model of kindness and strength. But here was David, showing him love in the simplest, most honest way, by being present. Later that night, after her son had fallen asleep, Emily joined David on the balcony. The city sparkled around them, the hum of life far below. For a moment they stood in silence, the cool wind brushing against their faces. David glanced at her. You know, Emily, you don't always have to carry everything alone. Some battles are easier when you let someone fight beside you. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm scared, David. I gave my heart once and it nearly destroyed me. He reached for her hand, not forcing, just offering. Then don't give it away. Share it, piece by piece, however long it takes. It was in that moment Emily realized love didn't have to be dramatic or destructive. It could be quiet, steady, and safe, and maybe that was the kind of love she had been searching for all along. Weeks later, Emily invited David to join her at a Phoenix Designs fundraiser. It was her first public appearance with him, and whispers filled the room as cameras flashed. Is that Emily Parker's new partner? She looks happy. She deserves this. Emily didn't hide. She stood tall, David's hand gently resting on hers, her son clinging to her dress. The image captured by reporters, a woman once broken, now standing with strength, love, and family, spread across media like wildfire. Michael saw the photos too. Alone in his penthouse, he stared at the smiling faces, his own reflection in the glass a stark contrast to the happiness he had thrown away. But Emily didn't think of him anymore. Her story was no longer tied to his. That night, as she tucked her son into bed, he whispered, "Mama, can David stay forever?" Emily kissed his forehead, smiling softly. "We'll see, sweetheart. Forever is a big word. But maybe this time, forever can be real." Later, when she stepped out to the balcony again, David wrapped an arm around her shoulders. For the first time in years, Emily let herself lean into someone else's strength. Love had returned to her life. Not the kind that burned and destroyed, but the kind that healed and endured. And Emily knew, deep down, that this love was her second chance. Emily Parker never set out to become a symbol. She only wanted to survive, to rebuild, to raise her son with dignity. But her journey, her betrayal, her rise, her triumph, had captured the world's attention. And with that attention came responsibility. It began with letters. Thousands of them. Women from every corner of the country wrote to her. Single mothers abandoned by husbands, wives trapped in loveless marriages, daughters of broken homes. They poured their hearts onto paper, thanking Emily for proving that strength could be born from pain. One letter stood out. It came from a woman in Detroit, a factory worker struggling to feed her 2 children after her husband walked out. She wrote, "I thought I was finished. But then I saw your speech. I told myself if you could rise, so could I. Thank you for giving me hope." Emily wept as she read it. She realized Phoenix Designs wasn't just about building homes, it was about building lives. And she wanted to give these women more than inspiration. She wanted to give them tools. So she launched the Phoenix Initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting women rebuilding after betrayal, loss, or hardship. The initiative provided housing, job training, childcare, and counseling. It became a movement, with donors and volunteers pouring in from across the nation. At the launch event, held in the same ballroom where she had once been humiliated, Emily stood before a packed audience. Politicians, CEOs, activists, and families filled the room. The irony wasn't lost on her. This was the very stage where Michael had paraded Madison like a trophy. Now, it was her platform of power. Taking the podium, she looked out at the crowd. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew steady. "I once believed my life was over because of someone else's choices. But what I learned is this: no one has the power to end your story but you. We are not defined by the people who betray us. We are defined by how we rise after the betrayal." Applause erupted, some standing, some wiping tears. Cameras flashed, capturing her image against a backdrop of the Phoenix Initiative logo, a rising bird, wings spread wide. From that moment, Emily wasn't just a businesswoman or a survivor. She became a leader. She toured schools, spoke at universities, stood on conference stages, and appeared on television. Her words, simple, honest, heartfelt, resonated with millions. Her son often accompanied her, holding her hand as she stood before cheering crowds. To him, she wasn't just mama, she was proof that strength and kindness could coexist. David stood beside her too, quietly supporting, never overshadowing. He understood that her mission wasn't about fame but about legacy, and he admired her all the more for it. Meanwhile, Michael's name all but vanished from the public eye. Where once he was seen as untouchable, now he was remembered only as the man who lost everything. In contrast, Emily's star burned brighter with each passing year. But Emily didn't build her legacy on revenge, she built it on resilience. Her triumph wasn't about Michael's collapse, it was about turning her pain into power, her scars into strength, and her story into a beacon for others. And so Emily Parker became more than a woman who survived betrayal. She became a voice, a vision, and a legacy. A reminder that from ashes, we rise, and from heartbreak, we build new worlds. The stage was set in New York City, beneath the bright lights of a global women's empowerment summit. Thousands filled the auditorium, millions more tuned in through live broadcast. The program director had asked Emily Parker to close the night with her story, a story the world now knew but still longed to hear from her lips. Backstage, Emily adjusted her simple white dress. No diamonds, no designer labels, just grace. David squeezed her hand. Her son sat on Helen's lap nearby, waving proudly. "You've got this, Mama," he shouted. She smiled, steadying her breath. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about every woman watching, every soul who had ever felt broken. When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted. But Emily raised her hand gently, not for applause but for silence. She stood tall, her voice carrying with calm conviction. 3 years ago, I lay in a hospital bed, broken in body and spirit. I had just given birth, and instead of holding my husband's hand, I was handed divorce papers. I thought my life was over. I thought I was finished. The room hushed. But here's the truth I've learned. Sometimes the end of one chapter is the beginning of your real story. Betrayal doesn't define you. Abandonment doesn't define you. What defines you is the choice you make in the ashes, whether you stay down or whether you rise. She paused, letting the words sink in. Faces in the audience glistened with tears. I chose to rise, not because I was fearless, but because of this little boy. She pointed to her son, who waved shyly as the crowd turned toward him. Laughter and soft applause filled the room. He gave me a reason. And then I realized, every woman, every person in pain, has a reason too. You just have to hold on to it long enough to find your strength again. Emily's eyes scanned the audience, her voice deepening. To the woman who thinks she can't go on, yes you can. To the mother who thinks she's alone, you are not. To the person who feels broken, you are not broken. You are becoming. The audience stood, the energy electric. People sobbed openly, clapping through tears. Emily smiled, her own eyes misty. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. You do not need revenge to heal. You do not need their apology to move forward. You only need your courage to keep walking. From the ashes of betrayal, you can build something greater than you ever imagined. Her voice softened into the closing words. I thought I needed to be a wife to matter. I thought I needed someone else's love to have value. But I was wrong. I am enough, and so are you. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, some chanting her name, others holding hands, inspired by her journey. Backstage, as she embraced her son, he whispered, Mama, you're a hero. Emily kissed his forehead. No, sweetheart, I'm just a woman who refused to stay down. And as the lights dimmed and the summit closed, Emily Parker's story became more than survival. It became a testament that no betrayal, no heartbreak, no loss could silence a woman who chose to rise, and in her rise, she carried millions with her. So that's how Emily's story closes, my dear friends. You're still here with us, right? If you are, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in a way words can't fully describe. Maybe you've been through betrayal. Maybe you've known heartbreak. Or maybe you're still trying to rise from your own ashes. And that's why this story matters. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Emily's pain didn't end her. It became the very fire that forged her strength. That's the lesson for all of us. We can't control what life takes away, but we can choose how to rebuild, how to rise, and how to become even stronger than before. So, if you take anything from this story, let it be this. You are enough. Your scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof that you've survived and that you're still here, still standing. If Emily's journey moved you, share this video with someone who needs hope. Hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, because more stories of resilience are waiting. And remember, you too can rise.